What would you do if you were given the ability to see into the future, but it was always wrong? And then we go on a hike with a young man, stomping through the forests of East Tennessee. He spent many a day walking these trails. He knows it like the back of his hand. So when he stumbles upon a mysterious clearing, he's forced to ask himself, what secrets lie deep in the woods? Today on Dead Rabbit Radio.
Actually, I'm a lot freaked out.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. We got a lot of stuff to cover today, so first off, running into Dead Rabbit Radio Command, everyone get on your feet and give it up for Cat. Woohoo, yeah, there's a little cat walking in, we're all petting him, rubbing his ears. Yeah, come here, you're a good boy. You get some snacks. You get leftover stovetop stuffing. It's all dried out. It's as hard as a cat snack. Kat made a donation during our Thanksgiving live stream special, so I really appreciate that. That is why you, Kat, are going to be our captain, our captain. That's dumb. Our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the show financially through live streams or the merch store or Patreon, I totally understand. I really do. I say it every episode because I mean it. That's fine too. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. That is how you can help the show grow. Kat, get your little paws ready. I'm going to toss you the hair hang glider. Everyone grab on a cat's ankles. Hopefully this is a muscular cat and can support the weight of us. Cat, jump off the highest point of Dead Rabbit Radio Command. We're going to glide all the way out to a little girl's bedroom. Headed all the way out to this bedroom. We're about to meet this little girl. She didn't give us her name. We're going to call her Maggie. Maggie is 12 years old-ish. Around there, 12, 13 years old. We see her laying in bed. She's kind of tossing and turning. No. Oh. She's groaning. She sounds like she's having a nightmare. We see her just kind of kicking the sheets around. Get on the story, Jason. I was like, she did this for 8 hours. She's tossing and turning, and all of a sudden, she wakes up with a start. She was indeed having a nightmare. In this nightmare, she saw her friend, her best friend, who we will call Rebecca. She saw her best friend trapped in a fire. The very next night, Rebecca's older sister's ex-boyfriend was caught trying to burn down their house. But he wasn't able to. He wasn't able to burn down the house. Nobody got hurt. Rebecca survived. And the boyfriend was arrested. Yesterday's episode, we talked about prophetic dreams. We're going to take a look at another case here. I think it's a very interesting compare and contrast. Maggie has this dream of her friend Rebecca dying in a fire the next night. A fire almost engulfs their house, but it stopped in time. Maggie said when she wrote this up, she wrote it up under the name Marauder424. She said, I feel like my dream saved my friend. So I'm assuming, she didn't specifically say, but I'm assuming she told her friend what had happened. She said, hey, Rebecca, I had this horrifying dream last night that you died in a fire. And there was something about it. It was something more than a nightmare. Sometimes that's enough to kind of get you on your guard. Like we covered in yesterday's episode. Someone called up their friend and said, I had a dream you were going to get in a car that's a blue four-door sedan. and you're going to get in this horrific car accident. And even though the guy didn't know anyone with that type of car, and he didn't believe it, he didn't believe the dream, he thought it was like whatever, it put him on guard. So when his friend did show up in a brand new blue Honda Civic, he said, I'm not going to get into that car. And the car did get in a car accident about an hour later. So I'm assuming, because Maggie says, I feel like my dream saved my friend's life. I'm assuming she told Rebecca about it, put that kind of in their head. And then when something was suspicious, they were able to put an end to it. Perfect wrap up, right? The idea of dreaming of a tragedy before it happens and then averting the tragedy is really what we think about when we talk about seeing into the future. But this story isn't finished. Maggie had the dream, Rebecca dies in the fire. The next night, the boyfriend gets caught trying to set the house on fire. Nice little bow on that dream story. Over 8 years later, when Maggie and Rebecca are both in their 20s, Rebecca gets in a horrific car accident. Her car ignites on fire, and she dies in the burning wreckage. Maggie says, in the dream, Rebecca was in the fire alive. She was being burned alive. And she hopes that that wasn't the case in the car. She hopes that Rebecca was actually killed during the impact of the vehicle, because burning alive is one of the most painful ways to die. Maggie said that she had more dreams like this. She had more dreams like this when she was pregnant. One day, her and her husband were discussing baby names. That night, Maggie had a dream where she saw her husband standing there, and he was holding what looked like a swaddled baby, like a little bundled up baby in a blanket. And she just sees her husband standing there looking down at their child. Shortly after that, Maggie had a miscarriage. Odd. It's very, very weird. I mean, like yesterday, I know it's cliche, but we talk about, is it a blessing or is it a curse? In this case, I mean, like, it's almost a torment to be able to see these things. Because here's the thing. If your best friend died horribly and you lost your child, that's just awful to have to go through in the first place. But now add the pain of seeing it before it happens and really not being able to do anything about it. I think it's the false hope in Maggie's dreams, as opposed to the previous one. She did save multiple lives leading up to the climax of yesterday's story. And this one, I mean, like, it almost seems cruel. It almost seems truly like a curse that the universe is being so mean to Maggie. Why even give her the dreams in the first place? Why even give her the dreams in the first place if you can't stop it? I mean, the husband holding the swaddle, because she didn't really see that it was a baby. He was just holding something wrapped in blankets that was baby-sized. And, he was looking at his child who didn't have a chance, wasn't even born. And that father's love for her kid he'll never hold, but still love. You can find some kind of peace in that, a little bit. But the idea of having a dream, saving your friend's life, but, oh, no, you got the date wrong. She was actually going to die in a horrific car accident. And here's the thing, too. The story we covered yesterday, it was a very short amount of time between the time the woman had the dream and the time something happened for most of those stories. In this case, even if she told Rebecca, hey, I had a dream that at some point in your life you will die in a fire, even if Rebecca took that to heart and was very careful for a couple months or even a couple years, 8+ years later, you can't avoid fire for that long. Even if they avoided flames, they didn't go to campfires. They're like, nope, no roasted marshmallows for me. Keep those chestnuts in my stomach. I don't want them resting on that open fire. All that stuff. She's just driving down the road and her car ignites. The car accident, because that does happen sometimes when the car accident's so violent and the mixture of the fuels hits sparks and all that stuff, you burn alive. It's rare, but it happens. Even if she avoided as much flame and fire as possible, she won't go see Ghost Rider when it comes out of the movie theater. She's like, I really like Nicolas Cage, but nope. She dies in a car accident. She burns to death. It's such a long lead up to it. This one just seemed kind of sinister. It really does beg the question. I really can't pontificate too much about this. I could go on and on for a long time about it, but I won't. Does the world of the paranormal have a consciousness behind it? I mean, the short answer is, with so many paranormal questions, I don't know. But is there an actual consciousness behind the world of the paranormal? And in this case, is it sinister? What's the point in giving someone the gift of sight, the gift to see beyond the now? And it's off in a sadistic way. You know what I mean? It's close enough. Because, I mean, Maggie, she sees her husband holding the little swaddled child. And that must have touched her heart in such a way, like, oh, like, my husband, we're ready for this. We're ready for this. We're ready to raise this kid together. Like, that's an image of hope. It's an image of love. And for it to be for the answer to be, no, you're not getting this. At least not now. You're not getting this. It seems cruel. Like, as far as the world of the paranormal goes, did it know? If it can see in the future, you would assume it would know. And here's the thing. You go, Jason, there's no consciousness behind the world of the paranormal. I mean, that would take like an entire... I don't know. See, that's the thing. I don't know. Is there a universal consciousness which would include the consciousness of the paranormal? Are there separate consciousnesses? Is that why the world of the paranormal seems so off? Because there is a universal consciousness and then separately a paranormal consciousness? Or are there just no consciousnesses at all? Or 1,000 other different theories? It just seemed cruel. It just seemed cruel what was happening to this young girl. An adult, it continued on through her adulthood. Mean, very mean-spirited. You would rather not have the ability than for this to be the ability. So, interesting, compare and contrast. Yesterday's episode, multiple people's lives got saved. This one, the same amount of people died, but she was given false hope. She had other dreams like this. Those are the two most notable ones. I'll put her entry in the show notes so you can take a look at it. But, cruel. That's the word that keeps coming back to my mind. Sadistic and cold-hearted and cruel vision of the world. Showing someone hope and then removing it is one of the most dastardly tricks of all. Truly soul-crushing to be given hope and then have it taken away. And in the end, it was false hope. The person who was saying, hey, there's a way out, they knew there wasn't a way out. And they actually were waiting for you to reach their hand up to you, and then you go, psych! Terrible. Terrible, terrible stuff. But you know what's not terrible? Home life insurance. Here at Dead Rabbit Radio, we have... I'm just joking, I don't do life insurance ads, but... You know what's not terrible? Bring Home Smile 2 on digital now. In this terrifying thriller, an unknown force is latched onto global pop star Sky Riley as reality and her nightmares collide. By the film critics are calling the scariest movie of the year by a mile. And get over 40 minutes of bone-chilling extras, including deleted scenes. I need to see what those scenes are. I'm really curious. 40 minutes of bone-chilling extras, including deleted scenes and more, available at participating retailers. Rated R from Paramount Pictures. Yeah, that movie's dope. Really, really good. You know, it's funny because we talk about things like the solar plexus clown gliders on this show. I'll put some of those episodes in the show notes. That's pretty much what the smile demon is. It latches onto you and it feeds off your misery. It feeds off all the things that make you not want to go on. Physical pain and emotional scars and bad memories and betrayals and false hope. That is a big theme of Smile 2 as well. So, yeah, check it out. You're like, Jason, I know you love the movie. You talk about it all the time, and then you immediately make it sound super depressing. It's pretty good, though. It is pretty good. Speaking of smiling, look at that cute little cat over there smiling like a Cheshire cat. Cat, I'm going to toss you the keys of the world famous Carpenter copter. We are leaving behind Maggie's bedroom. Why don't you fly us all the way out to Tennessee? We're headed all the way out to Tennessee. Specifically, we're headed out to East Tennessee. It's the early 2000s. In East Tennessee, we're going to meet a young man. Let's call him Victor. He didn't give his real name. And he said that he lived with his grandparents on a piece of property that sat right next to the Cherokee National Forest. Cherokee National Forest is a massive parcel of land spreading across 2 states, Tennessee and North Carolina. It contains many beautiful wonders, including the Great Smoky Mountains. You could hike for days and always see something new. I don't know if that part's true. I'm not doing an ad read for the Great Smoky Mountains or for the Cherokee National Forest. You probably see just the same squirrel over and over again. You see a couple ducks. It's beautiful. It's huge. 655,000 acres. But we're not traveling through the whole chunk of this land. We're going to take a look at a small slice of it. That's the slice right near Victor's house. Victor lived on this mountain for a long time with his grandparents. I called him a young man. We actually don't know how old he is when he's doing this story. Could be a teenager. But he spent many a year living there with his grandparents. And a lot of the locals would talk about the weird things that they had witnessed. Or maybe even just felt. The local town was not short of stories involving strange shadows moving through the forest, unexplained lights lurking behind trees late at night. There is even a talk from the local pagan group that had set up in the nearby town. The local pagan group in town often spoke of a psychic vortex at the base of the mountain near where they all lived. One of the reasons why the pagan group was attracted to that location in the first place. So there was no shortage of stories about how weird the woods were. And Victor had heard them all. Victor said when he traveled through the forest, taking these walks, sometimes the walks were for recreation, sometimes it's just to get somewhere. You always felt, or at least he did, he always felt that somebody was watching him. You'd get the unmistakable feeling of someone staring at you. And he would turn and you'd look and there'd be no one there. You'd walk and walk and walk, and the feeling would grow again that something was watching you, something was behind you, something was lurking just out of your eyesight. And you never really got used to it. It was just something you came to expect. Something would watch you while you were walking through the woods. Well, on this particular day, I mean, because, listen, that sounds super creepy. Or, Jason, like, why would I walk through the woods if I constantly felt like I was being watched? There's some sort of psychic vortex I might get sucked into. You're like, ah! Why would I walk through the woods? At a certain point, you'd have no choice. It's where you grow up. That's the interesting thing about the paranormal. I'd be like, there's no way I'm walking through those woods. But if I was 13 and I heard all those stories and then grandma sent me to go get some milk, I gotta walk through the woods. Gotta walk through the woods, get to town to get the milk. Like, you just do it. And then after a million walks and you're like, oh, hello, invisible stranger behind me. Like, you wouldn't get used to it. You wouldn't ignore it. But you would just figure it was part of the environment. Something's watching you. And it can't be too menacing if you've been doing the same walk for years and nothing's happened. So Victor's out walking on this day. It's actually early fall. It's a late afternoon, one early fall day. And the leaves have changed from green to yellow to brown. Leaves are slowly starting to fall off the trees, preparing for the winter landscape that is soon to come. Victor's walking through the woods, crunching these leaves underfoot on a walk he's made 100 times, 1,000 times before. But on this particular day, he's walking and he comes across the clearing. A clearing in the woods he's never, ever seen before. But it's more than that. It's more than that. This clearing was small. It wasn't a huge area, but the first thing he noticed was that it was ringed by several small trees, which were the border of the clearing. They were spaced about 10 to 15 feet apart from each other, and each tree was adorned with green leaves. He's looking at this ring of trees, these bright green, healthy leaves, juxtaposed against the rest of the forest, the golds and the browns and the reds that have already begun to fall. Leaves that have already begun to fall. This ring of trees, they were young trees, they were small trees, and they all still had green leaves. The ground in the clearing, the soil itself, was covered in a bright green moss, with not a single errant leaf blowing into it. The leaves that had fallen down from the neighboring trees, the older trees, outside of the clearing, their leaves were on the ground. Their leaves were covering up the roots. Their leaves were on top of rocks. Their leaves had fallen every which way, except in the clearing. In the clearing, there wasn't one fallen leaf. Just green. Just life. This ring of small trees, the ground covered in a green moss. Nothing from outside the clearing has found its way inside. Finding the clearing in the woods, finding something that you've never seen before, not totally unusual, but finding something so not just out of place, but out of time. This clearing, it shouldn't have been here. Not just, I've walked this 100 times and I've never seen it before, because sometimes our brains do go into autopilot and we may not see things. No. The trees aren't losing their leaves. This looks young. This looks healthy. This looks like a beautiful little clearing I might take a nap on a warm summer day. Victor walks into the clearing. And he's just kind of looking around, trying to figure out what happened. Why is this here? This doesn't really make any sense. And that's when he realizes inside the clearing he hears no wildlife. And what I mean by that is that he's in the clearing and he doesn't hear the wildlife outside the clearing. When he was walking down the trail, he'd hear birds cawing in trees, squirrels busting their nuts, trying to get to that delicious inside meat of a nut meat. But once he's in the clearing, everything is silent. There's no wildlife, no birds, nothing. But more importantly than that, once Victor walked into this clearing, it was the first time he has ever walked through the woods and not felt the sensation of somebody watching him. He was truly alone in the woods for the first time. And he stood there in the clearing, looking around. It's so out of place. He can't hear the wildlife. He doesn't feel that constant set of eyes on him at all times. And Victor gets a thought in his head. You know what? I just need to take a seat. I should just sit down here on the ground and rest. It was more than just a thought, though. Although that's how it might have started off. Victor said it was a, quote, almost overwhelming sense of wanting to sit down and just stay there, unquote. It wasn't just something that popped in his head. He had this need to do it. To just sit down, man. Take a seat. Rest. Just take a seat, my friend. Just sit down. Just stay here for a little bit. But he decides to not sit down. He fights this overwhelming sense. And the reason why is Victor said, the woods is not a good place to be at night. It's not very pleasant to walk through these woods after the sun goes down. And I should get home. I should get home before that happens. So he walked out of the clearing and simply walked back home. The next day, when he was taking that walk again, he wanted to check out that clearing again. He was like, what was that? That was so weird. No animals? Like, what was the whole thing? Where were the leaves? Like, no leaves? Like, just so many questions. None of it makes sense. So he went down that path that he's made 100, possibly 1,000 times before. He was never able to find the clearing again. This story was posted by someone going by the name Visith. And what's interesting is, as I was looking into this story, it was great because we have not a super specific location, but good enough sometimes. When I looked into Eastern Tennessee, when I looked into the Cherokee National Forest and the Great Smoky Mountains, I was surprised how many crazy paranormal stories are found in that area. And we've only covered one out of 13 and some odd episodes here. 1364, 1365 is where we're at. We've only covered it once, this region, and it was the episode about Spearfinger. I'll put that episode in the show notes. It's a pretty crazy story. There's a legend of a vanishing lake, which I'm still researching. I hope to cover that next week, because I thought I had all the information, and I just kept finding more and more things. And it kind of is related to this story. The disappearing lake is in North Carolina, but it's the same kind of idea. These places that shouldn't be there being seen every once in a while by somebody. We'll cover that haunted lake or that vanishing lake in a future episode. But there's a lot of stuff going on in this region, and we'll probably be covering a couple stories from this area in the future. And if you're from the area, or if you've ever visited the area and you have an experience, hit me up, deadrabbitradio@gmail.com. But let's focus back on this story. We'll wrap this up pretty quickly. The circle of trees, of course, it reminds me of fairy circles. Fairies are hella lame. Been through it 100 times. If I happen to see a magical circle in the middle of the forest, I would run away, because I'd be afraid that there were fairies nearby and I'd get sucked into some sort of boring adventure, quote unquote adventure. But aside from lame fairies, what's interesting about this is that it may actually put a twist on the missing 411 phenomenon, or just people mysteriously vanishing as well. Because maybe it's just me, but I don't think it is. I think a lot of people feel this way. When we imagine people vanishing into nothingness, never found, no piece of clothing or any clue, right? They just vanished off the face of the earth. One of my favorite stories, I'll put the episode in the show notes, is the story of Barbara Bolick, who disappeared off the face of the earth, and her friends were like 30 seconds behind her on a trail in the middle of the day, where she was an experienced hiker. She took a turn in the trail. The people behind her, 30 seconds later, took that same turn. She's never been seen since. It's a true crime story. The police have investigated it. Nobody knows where she went. And you can imagine her tumbling through infinite dimensions or getting lost in an amorphous void, screaming forever, going mad before her body eventually decays and turns to dust in this region of Null. Or that the boogeyman got her, right? Sometimes it doesn't have to be mind-breaking. Sometimes the boogeyman just jumps out and goes, boo. But what if, at least for some of these cases, it's not like that? It's a sense of serenity. It's this inviting place. Nothing sinister behind it. Yes, you will disappear off the face of the earth. And yes, your friends and family will miss you and they'll be worried and they will think the worst. But you yourself, you're actually better off. You're at peace. You're in Elysium. You're in this place that's so full of life, it's verdant, when the rest of the forest is shedding its leaves and preparing for a harsh, cold winter. And what's interesting is that, remember, Victor always had this feeling he was being watched, he was being followed. He never felt alone in that forest until he stepped into the circle. Once he was in the clearing, all of that, I don't necessarily want to say negative energy, but, getting spied on isn't positive. Once he was in that clearing, all of that paranoia disappeared. This idea you were being followed, this idea there was always someone right behind you waiting and watching, it vanished. I mean, it easily could also be like a Venus flytrap, right? It could be one of those things that the insect world has to deal with on a fairly regular basis. It looks inviting, it looks peaceful, but really you're just food. But what if that's not always the case? What if sometimes you do end up in a place that is more peaceful and serene than the earth could ever be and has ever been? So that's an interesting little twist in this story. We do have a tendency to think the worst, but what if sometimes, just sometimes, it does lead to a better life? If Victor had sat down in that clearing just for a moment, and then a moment longer, and then one moment after that, and then another, and another, until he loses track of time, but it doesn't matter. He's in a place of teeming life. Beautiful. Evergreen. Heaven on earth. he's never seen again, and his grandparents worry about him, and they look for him, and the police are called, and the forest rangers, and the community, and everyone's looking for him for months. Years go by, and the locals know the story about the boy who walked through the woods and was never seen again. Some might tell you he was beset upon by some wild beast. Others may whisper stories about what really goes on in those woods. But no matter what people were talking about or thinking about back here on our earth, in our reality, Victor is experiencing a peace he never even knew existed. Maybe sometimes when people go missing in these national parks, their existence is not filled with fear and panic, captives of an unknowable beast. No. Their life now and forevermore will be one of joy, relaxation, an everlasting sun shining down on them as they sit and enjoy the peace of the clearing for just one more moment. And then a moment after that. And another moment. And another moment. And one after that. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is at DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today.